Knicks trade RJ Barrett to the Raptors for OG Anunoby. Raptors get RJ Barrett, Immanuel Quickley in the second round pick. And now to think about where Toronto was just last season, right? There were reports that Memphis offered 4 first round picks to go get OG Anunoby, and Toronto said no. So to look at what I thought that was a misstep on the Toronto Raptors part, because if you can get that all for OG Anunoby, and I felt like that would have worked out well for Memphis, a guy that could shoot the ball and play defense, and especially now that they're missing Dylan Brooks, who has been playing well for Houston. I thought that would have been a good pairing, at least for Memphis. So to sit there and look at it afterthought, I thought that would have been a good trade for the Memphis Grizzlies just a year ago. But looking at the Toronto Raptors, who could have got all these assets for them, and now just having a second round pick, they did get 2 players in here. But looking at it from that standpoint, it's just like, the fallen assets, especially after the Rudy Gobert trade, you figure that would have been the best time to make that type of move and hit the iron when it's hot, especially in Toronto where they weren't really doing much. So looking at it from the Knicks side of things, they get OG Anunoby, Malachi Flynn, Precious Achiuwa, and looking at it from their standpoint of, one, I thought it was good that they got a big in Precious Achiuwa, because Mitchell Robinson's out with that ankle surgery. He's going to be out for a little while. So they needed a big. They needed somebody who can play forward, play big, play center. But I think for the Knicks, especially, let's start with RJ Barrett. Let me go back to that. RJ Barrett going to the Toronto Raptors, especially with Immanuel Quickley. I feel like that's a good thing for the Toronto Raptors in that retrospective, where this trade kind of works for both sides, and you can kind of see the development of what ideas they were thinking. First of all, RJ Barrett's already under contract, probably at a cheaper price than what they would have had to pay OG Anunoby, just because of the way the salary cap works. I believe RJ Barrett's around 27, 29 million for the next couple of years. He just signed that 4-year deal last season for 120 million. So he didn't even get out of the first year of the deal. So looking at it from that standpoint, but at least you have a set number for a player that you could potentially use. And especially with RJ Barrett's play style versus what OG Anunoby does, he's another creator, another ball handler. And especially if you're looking to pair somebody with Scotty Barnes, who seems to be taking the charge there, you're going to need somebody on the perimeter, another guy that can go get you roughly 20 points a game. RJ Barrett's at 18 points per game this season. So you're looking at that and just hoping that his efficiency picks up, because I think that was the main thing that, especially with New York, that they desperately just needed some more guy who's just a little bit more efficiency, especially shooting the ball. So looking at it from that standpoint for Toronto, they're getting a guy who's already under contract. They know what he is. Immanuel Quickley, I believe he's up for a contract extension. So you get a little flyer on him and see what he's able to do and give him some run there, because Dennis Schroeder has been the starting point guard. And you're looking to just start this over with a younger nucleus, right? You got Dennis Schroeder, who's also on that team, Jakob Poeltl, Pascal Siakam. So it's kind of like the old guard of the Toronto Raptors kind of staying around. And it's like that doesn't fit the trajectory of what Toronto is moving forward with Scotty Barnes, Grady Dick, who they drafted at 13 this year. So it's looked like there's a changing of the guard here where they're getting a couple of those older guys out. And now you look at Toronto, that opens up the door for Pascal Siakam. I saw a report that they said there's no traction as yet. They're just now getting feelers out there and trying to get offers. Who's older? He was part of that 2019 championship team and looking for a big contract. So now that you know that you don't have to pay OG Anunoby, you already have RJ Barrett under contract, that kind of opens up the floodgates for them to potentially trade Pascal Siakam, who's been tied. People have said to the Warriors. People have said other teams as well. And you look at what that could potentially mean for Jakob Poeltl, who's a big that they can get assets for around the league. I'm thinking Memphis, especially, who has been just drained for bigs in terms of Steven Adams and Brandon Clark being injured. Looking at Oklahoma City, looking to pair big with Chet Holmgren. So that kind of potentially opens the door there for some avenues where Toronto can continue to build assets, get younger players, get solid contracts either expiring, continue to flip those, figure out what asset building, especially with Masai Ujiri there. So it's looking interesting for the Toronto Raptors, at least now starting to hit the rebuild, especially after Kawhi left. Kyle Lowry was traded, all that stuff there. And I felt like this should have happened a lot sooner. where they could have got some different assets and been a little bit more towards the bottom and figured out what they were doing towards going forward, especially with Scotty Barnes, who looks like he's taking another level of his game, shooting the ball a little bit more from the outside and playmaking and doing all these other things with Scotty Barnes. He's a little dynamo that they drafted high, and it's like they want to see what he is, and especially with Grady Dick trying to figure out what he is because he hasn't really been able to get some time here. So it's going to be interesting to see what avenue the Toronto Raptors move with this rebuild here and finally hitting the button. And they've been one of the teams that said, hey, they have to rebuild. Chicago have said they have to rebuild. So Toronto finally hitting that button and getting this trade. Now, looking at it from the Knicks point, where they get OG Anunoby, who's just a better fit right now for the New York Knicks, right? RJ Barrett was nearly a 20-point per game scorer and not the greatest efficiency as a guard. But now you're getting somebody who doesn't really need the ball in his hands, more of a catch-and-shoot player and spreading the floor for Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle. So you're getting some guys that when those guys command the attention, creating, dishing, getting double-teamed in terms of driving to the paint, looking to score, now you got a guy that can knock down the shot at 37% from the field. He's 15-point game scorer, but he doesn't need the ball in his hand. Kind of fits that Josh Hart mold. And you're getting that another guy like that for the Knicks, for Tibbs, who's probably going to do some funky lineups now because now maybe they can play a little bit smaller, especially with Julius Randle. Maybe even run Julius Randle at center in certain lineups and certain things like that. And you probably don't want to do that because defensively and stuff like that, you're going to be worried. But the way the Knicks play and how gritty they are and how those guards are going to get after it, maybe they can survive even with that little lineup. Precious Achiuwa is added to that. Malachi Flynn's probably going to see some backup role there at point. It's going to be interesting to the Knicks, but the Knicks probably going to extend OG Anunoby, and looks like that's a smart thing. It just fits, especially with Brunson and Julius Randle, and especially what I said in the point where those guys are going to be commanding so much attention, leaving OG Anunoby. I still remember the corner three he hit against the Celtics in the bubble to end the game. I believe that was game 2. Looking at it from that standpoint. So looking at what he's going to be able to bring to the table, I think that's just a better fit. And for once, Tibbs modernizing his offense, adding more shooting and spacing on the floor, opening it up for Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle, who's playing well on the season. So looking at it from the Knicks standpoint of that, I think it's a good trade for both sides because both teams are getting something that they desperately need. For Toronto, hitting the reset button, the New York Knicks looking at in terms of modernizing their offense, opening up the game there, getting a little bit better efficiency. They lost Immanuel Quickley, who I thought was playing well for them. So looking at it from that standpoint, but they do get a little bit more shooting, a little bit more spacing on the floor, get another potential point guard with Malachi Flynn, Precious Achiuwa being able to fill that void next to Hartenstein and stuff like that. So I think it's a trade that works for both teams, and it's not something that desperately moves the needle for the New York Knicks, but it's something that can get a little bit more functionality in their offense. And I think that's something that they can desperately need and move on from the inefficiencies of RJ Barrett. RJ Barrett now has a chance to grow in Toronto, no expectations, just grow as a secondary option, especially because Scotty Barnes is taking off, in my opinion. So looking at it from that standpoint, and maybe the Knicks realize after signing Taj Gibson, we can't depend on Taj Gibson at this stage at 38 years old to continue to play and fill that void. So maybe that was another thing that Tibbs was like, yeah, that's not going to work for me right now at this stage of his career and stuff like that. So looking at it from that standpoint, I like the trade for both sides because at least it gives them some type of clear direction of where they're going to go forward. Looks like OG Anunoby is going to be signed there as well. So looking at it from that standpoint, I like it for both teams. Does it move the needle for the New York Knicks? I don't necessarily think so, especially not this season. But potentially looking down the line, maybe this is a way that they can potentially move off Julius Randle if they choose to do so. He's been playing all right so far. And get these contracts like Evan Fournier. He hasn't played for y'all. Trade him. Figure out what to do with him, New York. But I overall like the trade for both teams. I don't think this moves the New York Knicks in particular. Maybe they go overshoot Orlando, who's been playing really well so far this season. And maybe this is a trigger for other teams to make other moves. Maybe Orlando can make some moves there with Wendell Carter, Cole Anthony. Maybe they make a move now, seeing how that moves out in the Eastern Conference. Cleveland, maybe this forces them to now realize, hey, we're not going to be able to trade him to New York. Maybe we move Donovan Mitchell to Miami. Maybe there's a potential spot there for him. Brooklyn, maybe they move him in that direction there. So maybe this triggers some other trades that are around the league. I know some other guys are eligible in January. So it's definitely going to be getting interesting in the new year as we are entering the new year. So winding down here. Thank you for joining me as always. Hope everyone has a good new year. Stay safe, especially. And we'll pick it up in the new season. We continue to talk basketball. Check out Ring Takes, where things are picking up. Day 1 is happening tomorrow night. The Royal Rumble's approaching, so we've been talking about that. But thank you guys for joining me. Thank you guys for showing support on the channel on Twitch. I'm starting on Twitch, so check out Twitch as well. And just continue to support the channel. Continue to look at the shorts. Continue to look at the page, the videos I'm putting out, and check out the podcast on Spotify. I'm going to be uploading on YouTube as well. But thank you guys for joining me, and until next time.